Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We'll get the meeting underway. Thank you. The last meeting. I think I just think we should acknowledge that this is the very last meeting of this council, and just like to acknowledge everyone for all of their hard work, and thank you for all that you've done. Really, it's been a great 3 years. So well done. So apologies I have from Councillor Jones. I think is Raf Manji still an apology? Not sure. Should we write him down as an apology in the meantime? Yeah, but he's been representing the city at the Social Enterprise World Forum 2016 in order to welcome the Social Enterprise World Forum to Christchurch for 2017, which is and there's a fantastic Christchurch delegation, including a minister that's gone up, and he won't be back. Yeah. I just gave a free plug for the Social Enterprise World Forum. Have I mentioned that before this morning? But no, that's fantastic. So Councillor Manji's an apology as well. So who would like to move that? Jimmy Chen, seconded Paul Lonsdale. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. No declarations of interest. Would someone like to move the confirmation of the previous minutes? Andrew Turner, seconded by Jimmy Chen. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Now we move on to the public forum, and I'd like to invite David Dunn, who'd like to speak to us this morning. Good morning.
Morning everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here and listen to my request. I've lived on Avonside Drive for 33 years in the same house, and as you'll be aware, 95% I would think plus houses have disappeared on either side of the river from the Darlington Bridge all the way down to Brighton. The bad news that comes of that is that geotechnical tests done on the land show that the land where the houses are sitting is between 20 and 50 kPa and described overall as extremely soft. The concern is that traffic and movement are not going to help that land become stable. And to give you some idea, to put in normal foundations for a house at the moment, you have to have a 200 kPa as a minimum, otherwise you need special engineering foundations. So it's really to protect the foundations. The road as well is very, very damaged. The road is half green and then half red, and the half red part is very damaged, and it has constant flooding in very high tides or very high rainfall. I think the maintenance costs of A, repairing the road, and B, maintaining it onwards would be very, very expensive, but I'm not an expert. The issue has come up several times in the last couple of years with council about closing the road partially or fully, and it's never been resolved totally, I don't think. So it's not a new issue to you all. It's probably one that you've heard about in the last couple of years. I understand from talking to some of the traffic engineers that the road serves no network advantage. It could be closed and it wouldn't really inconvenience anybody to any great degree, because it's really just a shortcut between the Darlington Bridge and Wainoni Road. So we're looking at from the Darlington Bridge up to Porrick Park and then onto the Darlington Bridge. One of the solutions I had was that would suit everybody is to close the road on either side of the curve, the bend rather, at Avonside Drive, so that cars going forward will see the barrier on the straight on either direction and not go around the corner and have a crash. That will allow the footballers and all the people that use the park to be able to park there when there's not flooding going on, and hopefully that would resolve it. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions?
Avonside Drive. Yeah.
And which exact section?
It's between the Darlington Bridge and where my house is, or the road you mean?
I know where the road is.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Where's my house?
Yeah.
Okay, from the Darlington Bridge going towards Porrick Park, just past Nairemu Street, where there's trees on both sides of the road.
Right, so that bit's green and
Yeah.
the bit over the road is red.
Just before you get to the first entrance of the park, 2 houses prior to that, that's where the red zone starts.
Right.
So then you have the one entrance to the park, and then round the corner you have the football fields,
Yeah.
and then all the rest's red. And Porrick Park, of course, has been destroyed.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Glenn?
Thank you. Thank you for this. Have you seen the new curb and channel going down in Avonside Drive?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
Looks lovely.
Yeah. We'll just need to ascertain how far that will go onto Kerrs Road as well, and further down.
Yeah, I think the trouble is that the Kerrs Road, I mean, because of the diversion, because of Wooden Road being closed, a lot of people were travelling down Kerrs Road onto Avonside Drive and then hooking back onto Wainoni Road.
Yes.
So there's a lot more traffic using that section, which is actually the red zone section.
Yeah, absolutely. Our street, Avonside Drive, has got an awful lot of traffic now, and particularly large trucks, because Woodham Road's shut.
Yeah.
So that'll be the case till at least the end of the year. So I wouldn't advocate closing Avonside Drive until all that's been fixed, so that people have aren't inconvenienced again.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. I mean, that's just perfect timing, and
good.
it really very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Right, so the next person is Bob Todd, Linwood Woolston Pool. Hello.
Good morning, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Having had considerable involvement in the construction of the previous Woolston Linwood Pool and the positive impact it had on the community, may I thank this council and the local councillors, Yanni Johansson and Paul Lonsdale, for working together and finally getting the necessary funding on budget for the Linwood Woolston Pool. It has been a long journey to get to this stage, and this council should be proud of the fact of investing in such a needed facility in this area. It is pleasing that it's going to happen with funding and a firm commitment to build it. Residents in the community are excited and are keen to be engaged as soon as possible, as they were 50 years ago when the old pool was constructed. So I commend you and ask that you keep the momentum going with it as expressed in the annual plan. I urge you to keep the wider community engaged as to progress. Progress will help to raise the community spirit, and could I suggest that the obvious site for the pool would be the old reserves department on the corner of Smith Street and Linwood Avenue. They have now moved, and that would be an ideal site. At present it's a real eyesore, and I know from experience that the Linwood Rugby League Club are looking for a site for new club rooms, and a new pool and Linwood League club rooms on that site next to Linwood Park would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yanni?
Just one, and thank you for coming in today. Do you have any history of like the old Woolston Pool or pool in the area? And if so, can you just maybe give us a brief history of it?
Yeah, 50 years ago, the owner of the grocery shop on the corner of Hargood Street and Ferry Road approached one or two of us and said that what was lacking in Woolston was a swimming pool. So we got many of the residents together and decided, yes, we would approach the council to build a pool, suitable pool in Woolston Park. We put a proposal to council, however they demanded that the community contribute towards the cost of that pool. So we got together and it raised sufficient funds towards the cost of that pool that satisfied the council at the time. Thus it was built, and in that time it was well used, but unfortunately during a period when the oil prices skyrocketed, the council claimed they could no longer afford to heat the pool, and as a consequence many people were not keen on swimming in cold water, and the pool became virtually redundant and regretfully was demolished.
Yes, 1 minute and 7 seconds to go.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Has anyone actually spoken to the Linwood Leagues Club about being involved, possibly involved in a co-venture you might be talking
Yes,
about?
I have, and I think Councillor Johansson is also.
And are they keen?
They are very keen.
And do you think they would be, financially contributing as well?
Yes, they've just received insurance money from their former building, which was wrecked in the earthquake.
Right, and the Linwood School there, do they have a pool?
Sorry?
The Linwood School, do they have a pool?
They have a pool, but it's only
It's a little one.
a
So
small
they'd
pool.
have been walking distance to Smith Street?
So, what is required is a decent sized covered pool in that particular area.
But what I'm saying is, could Linwood School, is that walking distance to the proposed site in Smith Street?
Yep, only,
Right,
just,
so that could
only
be-
just down the road.
Great, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a process to go through in terms of site selection. I know that for the Eastern Sport and Rec one, a community, joint community board group was set up, a working party, and they looked at a number of different sites before they decided on the QE2 site, which should be announcing a contractor anytime soon. So this is a project that's on budget and it's proceeding. So,
As I say, we certainly appreciate it and look forward to its completion and opening.
great, thank you.
And can they send the letter to the council to express their interest?
Yeah, but I think there's a process to go through, and we do need to engage the community in a conversation about the best location. I was in at the library in the mall, and who would have thought that putting a library in a mall would increase the foot traffic by 30%. They had 1,400 people into the Linwood Library on one day. It's just been dramatic. So, I think talking to other clubs about what their needs for facilities are, that's absolutely the way to go. Good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Great. And now we move on to deputations by appointment, and I'd like to invite Tim Sinters and Warwick Schaefer from CCRU, re items 7 and 8.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. I'll pass you straight over to Warwick Schaefer, who's going to read out a report, and we'll go from there. Questions after if we've got time. Thank you.
Right, thank you for hearing us, and just before I start, I wish you all well with the re-elections. Hope to see you all back in a few months' time. We've got a couple of topics that are coming up today. One is the limb notations, and the other one is the Tonkin and Taylor rework, and you have a copy in front of you. I'm not going to go into every detail because I don't think there's enough time. So to start with the limb notations, this report should not be accepted by elected council. It should be referred back to CEO for further consideration and in consultation with affected community. Now this is the interim limb. We had a limb when the Tonkin and Taylor report came out. After the peer review, there was issues found in that limb, and so there's an interim one while the rework is done. We think that interim limb could be improved. We feel that the current limb is not clear, fair or balanced as it should be. A limb must be accurate, state the position fairly, and must not mislead. Now, just to be specific, in the current limb, we feel that the words, "this property may be susceptible to coastal hazards," unfairly cast uncertainty over the property, when keeping in mind the peer review says things such as the hazard areas be variously revised, recalculated, discarded and or reassessed before they could be used for planning purposes. Another point, the words "that identify some issues with the report." This understates the major assumptions and questions and minimises the amount of rework required to get the Tonkin and Taylor to a point where it can be used for planning purposes. A third point, Council is able and possibly required to consult with affected community when setting limb notations. We feel strongly that this should be done in this case and would result in a better outcome, and I've just put a small notation there to a relevant legal decision. Fourth point, the interim legal advice we have received suggests that given similarities with the Kapiti Ware case, it is not mandatory for CCC to refer to a discredited report on a limb. And there's some details there. On the second page, as a suggestion or a starting point, we've created a limb based on the Kapiti example that we think would be fairer and clearer. You have to imagine a limb situations where someone's selling a house and someone's buying a house. The lawyer needs to see it and have an exact and clear and fair idea without having to go to the background documents to really understand what is happening here. And it's quite important that a balance is struck between the buyer and the seller, and that's what we're aiming to get, and would like to work with you on that. The second topic I want to talk about is the Tonkin Taylor report rework. The Tonkin Taylor rework should not be rushed. The original Tonkin Taylor report was fast-tracked with disastrous results. We should not do the same with this rework. Now this, just before I get started, this is not a swipe at staff by any means. We've actually enjoyed working with them, and as we work our way down a collaborative path, it's been very good. In fact, we don't actually have a path, we have to build it as we go, but it's quite exciting for the future, and I think if we are given time and space to work with staff, we can produce something that's really good for everyone. I'm just saying here that this work program needs to go back to staff, and they need to be given enough time to work with community to come up with something that we can both sign off on. You don't want us back in 6 months' time pointing out problems. Third point is we have time. Sea level rise is a slow onset hazard. We have time to come up with a good response, and we have time to work in a collaborative way. The work to be done now is a critical first step. Collaborating and consulting with community after the job is done is pointless. So we need to be working together on this from the beginning, and what's actually done is a critical part of that. Point 4, an independent expert selected by the community and representing community interests should also review and comment on the rework proposal. Point 5, areas that are at risk now, mostly, if not all, will be earthquake affected areas, need to be isolated and focused on. We have the zero sea level rise maps from the independent hearing panels. These show exactly where these areas are. We do not need to rush into signing Tonkin and Taylor to progress this. The key is that these areas need to be separated out from those that will only be affected by sea level rise. The drivers are very different and the response needs to be different. Question 6, should Tonkin and Taylor be doing the rework? Community would be much more comfortable if it were not Tonkin and Taylor. The argument is that another firm starting afresh would dramatically increase the cost. This should be put to tender to find out. $190,000 to $250,000 is a lot of money, well, to me anyway. Hastily signing a contract with Tonkin Taylor is unnecessary and would be a mistake. Oversight of the rework will be via peer review. Community need to be confident that it will be rigorous and critical. Community should have input into this. In particular, if Tonkin Taylor are going to do the actual rework, with respect, the current candidate would not be acceptable. One example of a gap in the current work proposal is that sea level rise scenarios are too limited. The current proposal is only looking at 2 maps based on RPCs 8.5 and 4.5. We also need maps using current sea level trends to give a base case. We need to know what areas will be at risk if sea level rise simply continues at the rate it has over the last 60 years. Having this base case is essential if we are going to take an adaptive approach to mapping these hazards, which is there is a lot of support for. Thank you very much.
Well done, 3 minutes left.
Yep. Do you want to say anything else, Tim? Or
No, just to, we left some time in case you wanted to ask questions.
Yep, sure.
There is one small point I should just add on the limb topic, is that there is a case, I didn't mention it, for setting the Tonkin Taylor report aside while we do this rework. Thank you.
Phil?
Thank you. Could I just ask you, in terms of, so what are you asking should be, or suggesting should be on the limb at this stage from your perspective?
Yeah, so our suggestion, and it's just the suggestions on this back page here, I can read it if you like. The council has a report, Coastal Hazard Assessment Stage 2 report, that indicates that this property or part of this property may be susceptible to coastal hazards if, in a modelled worst case scenario, sea level were to rise 1 metre over the next 100 years. Sea level rise is currently approximately 2 millimetres per year. So what we're trying to bring in to the limb is actual context here, rather than something that's quite uncertain. It may be susceptible. Well, what does that really mean? It's quite scary for a house buyer or a lawyer potentially. We just want to make it more clear so you get a fair scope of it.
Why would you refer to the current rate when all the science talks about the impact of ice melt and things like that, which don't affect sea level rise at the moment? I mean, but why would you make a reference to the current rate when it's the future rate that is the subject to scientific predictions?
Yeah, well, that future is very uncertain, in particular with ice.
Yes, but are you trying to minimise? I mean, when I looked at the actual wording, I wondered whether you hadn't actually gone a step too far, rather than.
Look, as I say, it's a suggestion, and it's something we should discuss. And all I'm really asking for today is the chance to do that, and that point may well be made.
Yeah, Phil.
So I've got a second question too.
Sorry.
Like, could you, you've said really, like, clearly the review of the Tonkin and Taylor report, other scientists carefully and critically reviewed it. So you're already saying that the Tonkin and Taylor say should not be involved with the review. So where are you coming from in terms of your qualifications to actually say that they shouldn't be able to do this?
So it's not about the review. The review has happened. It's the rework to fix the original report.
So what I'm really saying, what are you basing it on in terms of, say, your qualifications, or what scientific evidence are you putting up that this group shouldn't be doing the job?
Well, as I've said, this is the things I can see as a layperson, and I am actually asking for, I think, point 4, that the community has an independent expert to look at this report and make sure that the rework is going to achieve the result we want. Absolutely, we should have expert opinion, not just people like me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn?
What's your sense of where the community is at with coastal hazards? So when it comes to limb notification, people are reasonably happy to accept. There's risk across the whole city in the inland areas, not only coast. So are you sensing, the community is happy to acknowledge that, but you're trying to convey some context around it? Is that?
Yes, we understand that council has to notify community about hazards, and sometimes it might not be news they want, but it just has to be fair and accurate for both parties, and that's really what we're driving for. And we don't think the balance is quite right yet.
It's not, and not only what physically goes on it, but the process by which we land on that too.
Well, I think so, yeah. I think, this can be a useful contribution from community in many areas, and this is another one.
I guess add to that too, if I could. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there through everything, because there's no clear answer at the moment. So it reflects on property prices. As I said, the only people it really affects in the 18,000 homes is the people that are buying, selling, or building. They're the people that it really affects.
Property prices are increasing
Property
in these,
prices
and
definitely shows.
insurance is still available too.
Well, we've reached the 10 minutes, so, I'd love to have a further conversation, but these things are rather restrictive.
Look, we
in terms of timing.
appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
And all the
Tom.
best for next week.
Thank you. So, there's presentation of petitions. There aren't any petitions, and the resolution to include supplementary reports onto the agenda. Do I have a mover? Andrew, second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So items 6 and 7, I wonder if it's easier to deal with the two of them at the same time. Yep. So we'll just deal with them as one recommendation. Well, I'm going to deal with them together because that. Why?
Well, they're two different subjects.
Well, one is simply one is
but-
simply receiving the information in a report.
Well, put them separately, please.
Yeah,
Well,
I can put them
but
separately.
you need them to make sense of each
in terms
other,
of the vote, I can put them separately. Yes, but let's deal with the two of them together.
Well, discussion-wise, fine, but
Yeah.
As a resolution separately.
Yes,
Yes, Leanne's
absolutely.
gonna
No,
do
that's no problem. I can put them as separate resolutions, but I'm going to deal with them together. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. Yep. Right. So perhaps if I could invite the Chief Executive to speak to the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I do empathise with the position and concerns raised by the current landowners presenting here today. I just want to talk about the LIM notations. And I think it's important to clarify the purpose of the Land Information Memoranda and the LIM notations. LIMs are provided on a property when they are requested, generally by a prospective purchaser, as discussed earlier. The provision of LIMs is an administrative function of all councils and is legislated by the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. So LIMs contain information that a council holds about a specific property, and under the Lagoima Act, any council must include any information that it has about any special feature or characteristic, including potential natural hazards that might affect the land and that are known to the council but are not apparent from the district plan. Now, as you know, the coastal hazards chapter is not being updated until after the replacement district plan is in place. So these potential hazards cover a large number of hazards. For example, the more than 50,000 LIMs in Christchurch that include a notation around the flood management areas, which are properties vulnerable in a 1 in 200 year flood. Almost every one of those properties covered by the coastal hazard notation is in a flood management area already. Almost every flatland property in Christchurch, at least all east of the airport, is also in a liquefaction management area, which is noted on a LIM if it's requested. Indeed, much of the residential land in Christchurch is subject to some type of potential natural hazard with associated notations on the LIM, including, for example, flooding, liquefaction I've mentioned, slope instability, rockfall risk, soft ground. And many properties also have multiple LIM notations for a series of potential hazards, including things such as potential contamination from prior land use. So Council has a statutory obligation to disclose information about potential hazards that it has, and even if it has some doubts about the full accuracy of the information, and that's supported by case law. LIM information is disclosed so that those interested in a property can inform themselves about the property. And as was said in the Weir case, the LIM was created to empower purchasers in the real estate market by giving them access to information. So the council can't unknow information. Alerting a LIM recipient to the existence of a report that a council has is not warranting the accuracy of the opinions in the report. It's simply disclosing the information it holds on the hazards identified in the report. Additionally, this is not a negotiation process with property owners or equally prospective purchasers about what's included in their LIMs. This doesn't occur with any of the other LIM notations that we have on our LIMs. So LIM notations need to be factual in presenting the information rather than emotive in description. And whilst the peer review of the Tonkin and Taylor report identified some issues, it also identified many positive and correct aspects of the report. So the entire report is not discredited. And I note that we haven't had that discussion, but there is comment in the handout around potentially being discredited. The panel actually comment in their executive summary that the panel finds that the report could and should constitute a suitable and robust technical basis on which to proceed towards the next stage of the development of the coastal hazards maps for the district of Christchurch after recommended modifications are made. Later in the executive summary, they specifically refer to the positive aspects of the Tonkin and Taylor report that includes spatial data as requested by council on areas susceptible to coastal hazards, including coastal settlements located on unconsolidated shorelines, and paying close attention to documents directly relevant to the technical expertise and exercise that they were undertaking. Notwithstanding this, we're committed to getting the technical information as accurate as possible. However, the real focus must remain on the community conversations and decisions that collectively we need to make in the coming years on the basis of that technical information. How we respond and adapt to hazards is the real issue for the people of Christchurch. So to get to the current notation, you will recall that we've reviewed the various technical reports available to council and case law and have balanced those with the broader issues of transparency, safety, public good, statutory and community issues. I discussed the draft notation with you all at the informal meeting on the 5th of September, and I made changes to the notation following feedback at that meeting. Not all the feedback that you gave us, but certainly feedback that balanced those issues I've just raised. As you know, the revised notation moved from being 4 specific notations to a more general statement that's still clear and states the position fairly, in my view. Some property owners have actually said that they would rather we stayed with the earlier, more specific notations, as their feedback has been that the general notation incorporates their property into a wider potential hazard area. So as such, it's really hard to satisfy all property owners, and council has to remain transparent and fair in providing that notation. I do also understand that the information provided on the website is highly technical when you look at it, and so we will provide a simple statement that alerts interested parties to the basis of the science and the issues around the various reports and the concerns that have been raised, so that it's easier for people to understand rather than have to try and read the document. The Mayor has subsequently raised with me advice that she has received regarding a further Tonkin and Taylor report for the Ministry for the Environment, which contains their view that a safe harbour or a period of grace should be allowed so as to enable the community to engage in a discussion about technical reports without this distraction of what's on the LIM. I've taken advice on that, but it doesn't change the current situation. That's a future state, but it's something that we should be thinking about. The LIM notations will be revised once, and if new land information becomes available to council as a result of the further work to be undertaken as recommended by the peer review. I'm also aware that the Ministry for the Environment is due to release its guidelines for local government and coastal hazards, including sea level rise, by the end of this year. I would expect that there may be some relevant information that we would need to consider, and if applicable, will reference this material. As this illustrates, information that the council knows will always change, and as a result, the content of the LIMs will be reviewed whenever new information is available. Moving forward, the Mayor has outlined a process of engagement with the various communities in the affected areas to work on improved detailed understanding of the potential hazards, as well as working with central government on national consistency and options for action or mitigation. And this is where we need to focus our resources, in my view. I'm heartened that the feedback I've received is that the most recent meeting of the reference group on the 19th of September was very productive and constructive, and I think that that was part of the feedback that we received this morning as well. I'm committed to the Council playing its part in ensuring a constructive relationship on this important issue, as we're still only at the early stages of what will be a very challenging and long road ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do want to comment on this Tonkin and Taylor report, which came to my attention just a week and a bit ago. And I wasn't aware of it, but it was only published in June this year. But it probably is relevant in response to one of the points that was made in the deputation, and that was a desire to move away from Tonkin and Taylor. I think the opposite is true. I think that it's absolutely vital that we remain with Tonkin and Taylor, because they've been engaged by the Ministry for the Environment to provide a framework for a risk-based approach for managing and planning for natural hazards under the RMA. And given that they are going to be leading this work for central government, and their report absolutely confirms the view that we have held right from the get-go, that there needs to be central government guidance so that these issues are not debated at a local issue, at a local level. Merely the education is certainly local, but the guidance is national. And the point that they have made, that the MFE intends that this framework will become the foundation for a possible new national policy statement and other national level guidance or interventions on natural hazards, providing consistency across the country. And they make the point in the introduction that living on a young island nation on the backbone of the Pacific Rim, New Zealanders are subject daily to the risks posed by natural hazards. There have been attempts by councils to manage risk associated with natural hazards through a risk-based approach, but approaches have tended to be ad hoc and often with varying degrees of success. But what really compelled me in relation to this report is that they have talked about the need for community engagement in a way that is exemplary. And they highlight in Christchurch and Kapiti why having this obligation around the PIMs and the LIMs actually undermine the capacity for a community to have a trusted conversation with its council. And I think that's a significant issue. We recommend that other interventions be considered as required to establish a safe harbour, and that's what the Chief Executive referred to in her commentary, to allow information on natural hazards to be obtained, shared, explored and communicated to all parties without prompting unnecessary, premature and unhelpful alarm and possible outrage about the nature of and inclusion of information on limbs and the challenge of its impact on individual properties and property owners. And they talk about the conflicting needs and obligations are about engaging effectively with stakeholders and communities of interest about information on natural hazards for the purpose of developing appropriate planning provisions under the RMA, and the obligation. So they confirmed the obligation under the LG or LGOIMO as we know it, to disclose information they have about properties and limbs, and to a much lesser extent on PIMs under the Building Act. And they refer specifically Kapiti and Christchurch. Case studies demonstrate how this can play out in significant anxiety and outrage and derail effective planning processes. In our view, an intervention is needed to provide an opportunity for councils, stakeholders and communities of interest to engage constructively and build their collective understanding of natural hazards. And it goes on. I'll circulate this to members, but the reason that I'm raising this is that in all of this, you know, it's been clearly understood that this is an administrative function of the council. What goes on the limbs belongs to the administration side of the council. So the Chief Executive has provided us with the report, and that's where it stands, and we receive her report today. What I'm going to recommend to council at the conclusion of the discussion around this is that we write to the Ministers of Local Government and the Minister for the Environment in order to alert them to the the real conflict that arises when the real focus of our attention should be on developing the coastal hazards chapter rather than on the limbs. And so with Council's agreement, I'll circulate the letter which I happen to have drafted ahead of the meeting, and we can discuss that as well. So I just wanted to update people on where we'd got to since the last time this was placed on the agenda. Glenn and then David.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we're into discussion / debate?
Well, I don't think, has anyone got any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? David?
Just a question of the Chief Executive. I appreciate, but don't particularly like the local government, the Goima Act clarification making this an administrative matter, but be that as it may, that's the way it is. My question is twofold, really. The deputation has highlighted in 2A and 2B that they feel that the current wording, and I quote, in 2A, unfairly casts uncertainty, and in 2B, understates the major assumptions in question. They have proposed some alternative wording, which I think, they would be a lot more comfortable with. And my question would be, would you consider bringing in some of their wording to address the points that they raise in 2A and 2B, unfairly casting uncertainty and understating the assumptions in question. And I think maybe we could get a middle ground here on a wording that may be more palatable to both groups.
So I don't think it's appropriate to wordsmith what's on the limbs by committee, and I think there are issues with the wording that's suggested. And certainly, my sense is that it actually makes it less clear, and that it's important that it's as clear as possible. We actually reduce the clarity by reducing the 4 notations down to 1. In an effort to make it more acceptable, but my sense is wording is actually making it less clear, but I will ask the team at the end, the experts. Any comments?
Thank you.
I think beyond the comments that both the Mayor and the Chief Executive have made in the introduction, I think that the challenges ensuring that we end up with legally compliant wording that is both fair and accurate, but also the challenge that I think Councillor East is raising about whether it's possible to satisfy everyone. And I think the challenge will be in reality that not everyone will agree on the exact wording, because the incentives and expectations of people are different.
Phil and then Yanni.
Thanks, Brennan. I just wanted to ask a question in relation to the second report, the programme. And on page 51, there's reference to the work that will be done on the coastal inundation hazard zones. And clearly from that, that implies to me that there'll be like a whole multi-hazard approach to assessing that. Whereas with the open coast erosion parts, it seems that there'd be some difference in the work. I just want to make sure that in fact there's enough money on budget to deal with these thoroughly.
Invited Peter Kingsbury to the table, and if we need further technical advice, Helen Beaumont as well. But if the question is non-technical, is there enough money on budget? The council will obviously need to ensure that it follows through and does this. So we're going to need to do this work, and we do have money on budget to complete this work.
And we do. And I guess my other question then is that going to be sufficient to give a full assessment?
Is the budget going to be sufficient? The budget won't be a limitation on getting the scientific and technical information correct.
Okay. Thanks, Brendan.
The only thing I'd add to that is we do intend to ensure that the program of work that we've defined with Tonkin and Taylor does adequately address the recommendations of the peer review panel report, and to ensure that it does do that, we will be engaging Dr. Deirdre Hart from the university to review that program of work before it starts and to be part of the peer review process through that work and at the end as well.
So the review is a review built in. Thank you.
Yeah.
That says to me that the expected to occur in late 2016 is not accurate now. It's probably March, April 2017.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, yeah. We're looking at roughly a 6-month period of work to complete or to address the recommendations of the peer review panel.
So where does that take us to?
If it starts at the beginning of October, which is still what we're aiming to, sort of March, by March, yep.
So can you change that to I think wriggle room's required, so just March/April 2017, or is that the first quarter of 2017? I don't know. March, April 2017. Yeah, thank you.
I apologise for the confusion that because of the different timing of the two reports, I think the recommendation for report number 7 is March 2017, and that simply reflected that we became aware of the timing of the Ministry for the Environment local government guidance, and we also, as was the point that Warwick made, have built in sufficient time to ensure that we go through the most robust process possible, including ongoing peer review.
So it's actually the revised advice from the Ministry for the Environment that will be available in December 2016. That's the plan. Have they ever released advice on time before? I mean, what's the probability of that occurring?
We're relatively confident that that will happen, given where the draft is with the work that they're doing.
Oh no, that's good. That's good to hear. I mean, excuse me for my little slightly facetious sound, but, we hear about reports that are due a particular time, and I haven't seen many that, arrive from, because it is so technical and everything. So, Yanni was next, I think.
I had several questions. I was just worried in the LIM wording, so I just want to check that the Chief Executive has seen what was proposed by this group, or is this the first time that you've seen this information?
I saw an earlier version. This is slightly different to that version.
So I'm just trying to understand whether there's any process that we can agree to today that could take on board the proposed wording and reflect on it.
So we.
It's the Chief Executive's role.
No, I understand.
And to get to the wording that we've got to has been a process of looking at the reports, the information that we have, and balancing that up with our responsibilities as the other feedback back that we've got. So we think we've got a legally sound, robust notation.
Yeah, and I've heard your explanation before as to how you've got what you've currently got on the LIM. I was just wanting to know whether it was worth taking on board the, if there was any process, but if that's the answer no, then I think that's very clear. I was concerned in the peer review, particularly the section that really commented on being misleading, and I just kind of wondered how we were addressing that through the LIMs, because it doesn't seem to me with the wording that we've got that it kind of makes that clear that the peer review identified that some of the reporting was misleading.
The report doesn't discredit the first Tonkin and Taylor report. It also talks about the positive aspects of that, and it talks about areas where there is more work to do, and that's essentially what we're referring to.
So, okay. If I just quote from the peer review,
on 13, it says the indicated coastal erosion hazard zone for all harbour sites, including Avon Heathcote Estuary and Brooklands Lagoon, are misleading. In many locations, they are not indicative of likely erosion hazard. So are those properties still having a notation on that doesn't make reference to that? And are they still being mapped in the same way, or has the mapping been removed?
Yeah, so I think the challenge is the 75-page peer review report that the council has received and adopted, or has received and now has an opportunity to accept the staff recommendations to go forward with those recommendations. I think the challenge that we face out of 75 pages is you will find words and you'll be able to find paragraphs that can be read in different ways, and selectively taking out words or paragraphs I don't think is ultimately useful. I think you need to read the report in totality, and as the Chief Executive has said, in totality the report isn't at the same stage as some other examples from around the country, and as the Chief Executive has also said, the accuracy of the report isn't a matter per se of the LIM. The LIM provides the reference to the report. It's not intended to duplicate or include the technical information or subsections or quotes from the technical report on the LIM.
Yeah, no, thank you. I understand that, but what I don't understand is why for those properties that have been identified as not indicative of likely erosion hazard and have been said, you know, are misleading, so it's a fact, not a question, why there's nothing on those people's limbs to identify that has been raised in the peer review. I would have thought that was...
The current LIM refers to the peer review report and to the and that there were concerns raised with the Tonkin and Taylor report. I think, you know, I mean, we're asking questions which assumes an influence that the council doesn't have, which is why I do want us to write to the ministers. But let me just, I've asked that we review the wording of the recommendation. So at the moment, the recommendation refers to staff will review and revise the coastal hazard land information memoranda notations again following the completion of the revised coastal hazard assessment stage. And I've actually asked the Chief Executive to pick up on the words that she used during her speaking to the report, which is noting that the LIM notations will be revised once and if new land information becomes available to Council as a result of the further work to be undertaken as recommended in the peer review. That means at any stage between now and the and the final position, which is when we've got a district plan chapter in place for coastal hazards, at which case there's nothing on the LIM because it's dealt with in the district plan. That what that enables us to do is to take an iterative approach, so that if information comes to light during the course of all of these elements of the work program, then obviously the Chief Executive can review the position at any time.
Yeah, I simply don't understand why this particular specific area, zoning, hasn't got reference on the LIM now.
But it does,
I mean,
because it does by implication, because it refers to both the Tonkin and Taylor report and to the and to the and to the peer review.
Yeah, but the advice that we've had is that
and the current LIM, Yanni, says that it's possibly affected by coastal hazards in the future.
Yeah.
Might be helpful. Until we've carried out the further work, we can't identify those properties that where that notation in terms of, you know, the changes to those areas affected by erosion. We can't identify those properties in the meantime until that further work is completed.
But as you complete that work, then you would certainly reconsider the LIM under that. So you wouldn't wait to take something off the LIM, or to refer to it not being susceptible in that regard.
It wouldn't be until March when we have the final report, the final revised report,
Even
that we'd
if
be
you-
in a position to make those changes.
Okay.
Like, I just don't understand why if you've got some work that's been done to look at the adequacy of the report, the original report, and it says that something's misleading, if you were buying a property, why wouldn't you want something
Oh, they
like
won't
that
be buying a property in Brocklands, that's for sure.
on the limb that said the peer review found for the CEHZ that many locations are not indicative of likely erosion hazard, and more work will be done to reassess.
Would any
that.
one of those properties not be covered by a flood management area?
Very few. So if it's not erosion, there would be an inundation notation on the limb.
Yeah, but current.
Which is the same
Currently,
notation.
flood management
Currently,
area.
yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Just a second question I had was, I think when this originally came to us, we'd asked that the work program, we thought that, well, I thought that the community reference group had worked quite well. They'd had a lot of input into the peer review, seemed to be quite a good process. My understanding was we were going to go back and work with that group around the work program forward. Has that happened, and what feedback have we had from that group?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we have had feedback from the group. We met with them on the 19th of September, and we talked through the work program with them then. Subsequent to that, we've had feedback from Warwick Schaefer's, and we have also responded to some of those suggestions, including a rolling peer review of the work, as well as looking at the additional scenarios for the sea level rise as well.
Good.
So,
David?
Just the final question was just on the request for going out for the contract in terms of doing the peer review, so going out to open tender, and also just the need for expertise for the community to be involved in this process.
Are you referring to the further peer review?
Yeah.
So
Right.
when Tonkin and Taylor's finished the report, there'll be another peer review?
There will be, and it won't be, we don't anticipate that would be to the same extent as having a 5-member panel. What we would do, as I explained, is have, we've talked to Dr. Deirdre Hart, and she is keen to be involved in the process, both from at the beginning, but through the work, and be the peer reviewer for the final revision as well.
Right. David?
Are we debating the work program as well?
Yeah, asking questions on the work program as well, yes.
I've got questions here on work program. Under 3.8 in the report, 3.7, sorry. It's anticipated that the full scope of all technical work will be completed by March 2017. What confidence can we have that this is an extremely complex piece of work, and you're basically telling us that you can do all this work in a few weeks, basically,
What?
once you've set a work plan?
A few weeks?
Yeah, just
What was
to
months,
be
Lester?
just to be clear, what we've allowed for is 6 months to undertake this work, so about 26 weeks. What the work plan refers to are the recommendations made by the peer review panel that, in their words, must be done immediately. So the recommendations beginning with 222 in the peer review report. So we're committed to undertaking and fulfilling all of the recommendations made by the peer review that must be completed immediately. That's not to say that's the only work that will ever be done here. The peer review also quite clear that there's a bunch of recommendations for the reassessment in a period of years, and so I don't want to give the impression that in March we'll have all of the answers that we'll ever need. This is in fact an ongoing program of work. What we'll have in March is the position to complete the questions and the issues that were raised by the peer review report, which will simply take us to effectively having the technical information as best as what we know at that point in time, but it'll be an iterative and continual process after that as well.
It just seems to me that by March you are indicating that you would be in a position to effectively validate the current Tonkin and Taylor report.
No, we'll be in a position that we would have responded to the recommendations of the peer review. I wouldn't like to speculate one way or another about the outcome of that work. But if it gets to February and there's still a lot more work to do, we're more than happy to keep council well informed. But to pick up the point that Warwick made earlier, we're not going to rush this just to hit an arbitrary March date. So if it takes longer than that, then it takes longer than that, and I think that's quite appropriate.
Well, with respect, the one of the critical areas of consideration for the peer review were the coastal hazards erosion provisions, which really sort of predicate pretty heavily on sediment budgets and studies of what scenarios may flow out of the Waimakariri River particularly. I find it somewhat hard to comprehend that this information could be accurate. Or
There is a
reasonably
question
accurate.
mark at the end of the
I'm getting to the
sentence.
question.
Hey?
So how can you assure us that this critical factor of sediment budget can be appropriately addressed in a matter of weeks, months? To me, it could take a year or more to accurately get this information right.
There are two references in the peer review panel's recommendations to sediment budget. One is within the actual recommendations. The other is about work that can be done or should be done within a 10-year framework. The work within the 10-year framework does talk about sediment budgets and the need to have a better understanding of sediment supply. That is work that ECAN does on a routine basis in terms of beach profiling, and as at last week, ECAN are about to release their latest sediment budget for Pegasus Bay. So we'll be in a very strong position or a good position to include that information in the work to be done by March.
And my last question on is surrounding the peer review process itself. We don't appear to have had any input from the affected communities into the choice or appointment of a peer reviewer for this process, and in previous issues that we've had in council, we have had problems where shall we say, the peer reviewer or the experts that have been consulted have been sympathetic to the council's position. We don't appear to be having any independent process around the choice and appointment of a peer reviewer in this process.
Oh, well, I think Dr. Deidre Hart is an independent peer reviewer, so she was obviously a member of the original peer review panel.
Did the independent peer review panel have any input or process in the appointment of her to do this work going forward?
No.
No, thank you. Well, I think they should have.
Glenn?
Thank you for letting me change my mind. Just had one question.
You're allowed to.
On this, and I don't necessarily have difficulty with what we're attempting to do. It's not that. It's more the logic around it. So the government removes the coastal hazards chapter, but the report which informed that chapter is not removed. So even though case law is appealed to in alerting a LIM recipient to the existence of the report, a council is not warranting the accuracy of the opinions in the report. It is simply disclosing the information it holds on the hazards identified in the report. Then later, this is page 45, 6.8, it is acceptable for a LIM to alert recipients to a report, even though a council may have doubts about its accuracy. My question on the logic of this is, as I've said before, the truck and trailer effect. So you remove the chapter, but the report that informs that chapter and the information, which is also under question, remains there. I can't see how that stacks up, and actually, is that a fair go?
How can you do
that?
The summation of it is correct.
That you can do that.
In terms of the factual presentation of what occurred, you're correct. I think it would be a matter of speculation about whether that's a fair go or not, but the reality, and Judith will confirm, the requirements for the council to provide information on a LIM that is known to the council stand, notwithstanding that the requirement for the coastal hazards chapter to be part of the fast-tracked IHP process was removed.
Yeah, okay. It just looks like a cake and having it too, because you remove the chapter, but that information stays there. I'm not necessarily questioning the information in the TNT report, although it needs to be questioned, has been. But can a council actually do that?
I think the Mayor's letter that she's intending to write to the ministers is going to address the unfair issue that you raised.
Yeah, okay.
There is, I mean, it's always a balancing act. But anyway, so the motion which I would like to move is that the council receive the information in this report. Note that the LIM notations will be revised once and if new land information becomes available to council as a result of the further work. Can't see now. But to be undertaken as recommended in the peer review, and write to the Ministers of the Environment and Local Government to request an urgent response to the Safe Harbour proposal to enable local communities to engage in discussions over the Coastal Hazards chapter. Do I have a seconder for that, Phil? Yeah, any discussion?
Sure, and this is both reports together but resolving one at a time.
Oh, I see.
Is that what you mean?
No, we'll do that with the second one. So I need a mover and a seconder for the second report. So can you pop the second one up? Because I'm going to put them separately, but we'll debate them together.
Okay.
So I would like to move that the Coastal Hazard Assessment Report Stage 2 will be revised in accordance with the recommendations of the peer review and receive the technical investigation work program. Yep. You'd like to second that?
Yep, sure.
Seconded by Glenn. So I will open that up for debate. Glenn?
Yeah. Thank you. I still have questions over the logic around this, as you've seen, and we all know we're bringing both reports together. I think it's important at this stage to acknowledge the difficulty we've had in relationship with our community, and for me a lot of this is coming down to that relationship, and this is alluded to in the Mayor's draft letter where the concept of a safe harbour for dialogue in the future over this is talked about. For me, it's not only necessarily just the information that goes on land information memoranda, it is how the conversation about that happens in the community. And I think we have to be broader than just whether or not we're going to put actual information on LIMS. Actually, it's not our task, it is that of the CEs. It's about how this is done. There is hazards across the whole city. If you look on the hail register, you'll find where we're sitting right now is an identified hazard site. But we need also to broaden our minds and not also talk about hazards, but opportunity, which is what the program of work signalled by Regen will be about in the future. It's how to make opportunities out of these hazards. In terms of dissemination, I proposed, after conversations with leaders in South New Brighton last year, a community hub, because they wanted to break this dynamic of public meetings where people end up pitted against each other. And actually, as one of the representatives, and I am the other representative of the Burwood-Pegasus ward until October the 8th, I want to put an end to this. I want to propose a way forward where we sit down together, and I take on board the comments of the deputation today. This is difficult stuff, and I want to put an end to these meetings where we end up yelling at each other. I want us to sit down. The New Brighton Hub, I think, is a great place where the community can walk in and take on board this information in dialogue with Regen, the council, other community members, DCL. It's a place where the Commissioner for the Environment, Jan Wright, has suggested we could have the maps. This will be an iterative process. The community can take on board this information. They're intelligent. They will walk into it. They will make up their own mind over it. There is time to do things. You can settle in that, in many of the coastal regions, say as a young family today, and establish. I mean, the lifetime of an asset, a home or a council asset, is 50 years. There's still time to do things. There's no need to panic. I also pushed through the community board after this process last year a concept which Di Keenan and her team raised. Now, I would like to acknowledge Di's work on this, and that is the community leaders kind of peer reviewing, a different sort of peer review, the ways by which comms are disseminated in the community, because I think it's not only just been what does or doesn't go on the limb. That is to fall short of what we're trying to achieve. It's about everyone working together. We have to put an end to this either or, them and us. It's got to be all of us working together. One thing I have picked up from another part of the ward, and that's in Dallington and Sutton Place, a comment from a resident there, that when the council kind of promulgates all these layers of hazard and risk and whatever, the comment was, when you do that to us, and I think that sums it up, and I think that sums it up the dynamic of what happened last year, and that's what we were guilty of when we did it to them. So we need to learn from this, and we need to kind of like do things together and work through this information. I'm glad the peer review's been undertaken. It needed to be tested, and there will be something that has to land on a limb. We all know you can't have a blank sheet of paper, but we also need to acknowledge we have hazards and risks across the whole city. It's not only in the coastal ward. So thank you to our staff, to the community for all the work to date. It is an ongoing one, and I think what's in the draft letter sums it up when it talks about a safe harbour. That's what we need going forward. But please, let's put an end to this them and us, and let's work together. Yeah, thank you.
I'll put the motion. Oh, David?
Thank you. I'm not going to sit on the fence on this one. This whole saga's drawn on a long time. We've had a report that was put together in 3 weeks. The planning chapter was withdrawn, but the document still remains, as Glenn alluded. Peer review came up with 20-odd recommendations, a significant one to remove the mapping references, and a recommendation that the limbs should be, reference in the limbs should be removed. I feel that our community has put up some reasonable requests for a rewording. I do appreciate that this is an administrative situation, but I find it somewhat uncomfortable that it is an administrative matter. I found the community request that sort of just to change things where it unfairly casts uncertainty on properties and or understates the major assumptions in question. And in fact, if you look at section 44A of the Lagoima section 3, in addition to the information provided for under subsection 2, a territorial authority may provide in the memorandum such other information concerning the land as the authority considers at its discretion to be relevant. Well, I mean, you could have all sorts of connotations there. I mean, I could say that tomorrow we could have a major flood in the Waimaka area, and at the same time the Southern Alp Fault ruptures, the stop banks get annihilated and Christchurch gets flooded. So should we be having a notation on every limb in Christchurch that there's a susceptibility to flooding if the alpine fault ruptures at the same time as the Waimakariri flood. So I'll leave that at that, and with the the proposed work schedule, I am rather concerned about the timeline that's being allocated for this work and their ability to actually complete this work in a manner that's going to have buy-in all around. And lastly, I think the peer review process going forward, it is with some concern that here we are again appointing a peer reviewer in an area that we've had contention with for months and months and months, and we've had no consultation with the affected group as to that appointment process. So regrettably, I don't think I'm going to support either recommendations today.
Yeah, Yanni, then Phil.
Thank you. I just was very happy to speak in support of number one. I know we're doing the two, so it's a bit hard to
Do you want to go?
highlight, but yeah, to me there's, so I'll just stick to the first one. I have no problems with number one and number three, but I am still really concerned that we've basically got a limb that doesn't make reference to the findings of the peer review for those particularly in the zone that has been labelled misleading, because I would have thought that that would be the right thing to do. I acknowledge that it's not up to us to make that decision, but I just think that it would be really good to try and work through this sooner rather than later, given the significance of that statement in the peer review. So I don't support the process of what we've got for reviewing the limb notations. I think there needs to be a better process if we can around that, given the seriousness with which the peer review identified some particular, and I know that it's not all, but some particular sections where it made very clear statements about them being misleading and not likely being in those areas that are in that report. It also made reference to removing the mapping, so I hope that that's been done for those ones. Going on to the work program, my view is very simply that we actually achieved a lot when we recognised the fallacy of the process that we'd initiated at the start by getting it slowed down and put into a more timely and considered fashion. That is something that I strongly support as a council in terms of our district plan, and it shows you possibly, I think, the benefit of us having sovereignty over our district plan or land use decisions rather than having other people putting us on a very strict timetable and in very strict processes. But what it does, I think, show is that the measure of us isn't about defending things when they're wrong, but it's how we actually acknowledge when mistakes are made and how we put things right that counts. And I think actually the first peer review that we did, from my observation of it, the collaborative process with the local community was actually excellent. Not everyone would have been pleased and got everything they want, but actually the process, from what I saw, actually was a very good process in terms of community engagement. And so I feel somewhat concerned that we've had a deputation today that has raised concerns with the way in which we're doing this work program, and it would certainly be my intention to consider or to propose an amendment, not wanting to lose the goodwill that's been established with that group, that we do actually think about not agreeing to number 2 of item 7, but that we actually ask staff to go away and work through the revised work program with the community and report back to the first meeting of the incoming council. To me, that would actually send a signal that we do hear the concerns that they have, the extensive efforts that they've gone through to make a deputation to us today, and I think that it would be a really fair way of doing it. And so, in conclusion, just to say that this is not an easy issue. It is a difficult, complex and very technical issue, but actually if we can get the processes right around how we engage and collaborate with communities that are impacted on this, then that's an incredibly powerful way of confronting what is very challenging. And so we've made a good start. I think there's still some things that we need to do, and I'd really like to move an amendment that we ask that the staff continue to consult with the community around the revised technical work program and bring that back to the new council.
An amendment on this, because we're just simply receiving the technical investigation work program. I thought the group, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just want to clarify, I thought that the group that was set up to work, you know, that has representatives from across the coastal areas, I thought that was still continuing. So can we
as an addition?
Can we simply note it and receive the technical investigation work program, which will address all of the relevant recommendations of the peer review panel, noting that this is an iterative program and that ongoing engagement with the, what's the group called?
There's the community reference group.
The community reference group will continue.
I need to clarify that, because the community reference group was set up specifically to do the to manage the peer review process. Their time has finished, but the discussions that we had on the 19th with the community reference group was to establish a broader community group, community advisory group or similar, to move forward through that process of the completion of the report through to community engagement in 2017.
And noting that this is an iterative program and therefore a community advisory group has been established or is being established to support the process.
Will be, yeah.
Will be, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Can I just have it clarified then that the concerns around who gets appointed, who does the work and how that happens, are they able to be addressed through that community reference group that's been re-established or newly established?
And who gets appointed?
Well, if you look at the deputation, you know...
Yes, I know, they recommended that we change Tonkin and Taylor, and we're not debating that. That's a matter that's already been determined. It's their report that has to be amended.
Yeah,
so
there was other questions as well around who did the peer review, independent experts, etc., etc. So I'm just asking if the things that were raised in the deputation can be actually raised through that community reference group.
They've already raised those with us, and some of those, and we've already addressed some of those in their work program.
Yeah, sorry, I've kind of interrupted the debate, and I didn't want to do that, but I also didn't want to accept an amendment that wasn't reflective of where things had actually got to. Phil?
Look, I think it's good to note that in fact the work that the local community group has done so well, and where they've been fully involved, in fact that'll be extended, and it's clear that in fact that a wide range of community groups now need to be represented in those further conversations, and that's implicit in the report, because clearly the coastal hazards in the future will affect all of Christchurch, and that's what we decide today is really, really important, that I agree that we need to have those wider conversations around these processes too. But I also think that, you know, council really, as Carleen advised us, we have to include the information on the limbs. That is a legal requirement, and I think that in terms of the wording, that it may be susceptible to coastal hazards. In fact, that's quite reasonable. It's also very clear that further work will be done, and Carleen pointed out too that in fact we're required to put some information on the limbs, even if there is some question around the accuracy of that. And we already have that information on Christchurch property owners' limbs for all sorts of other hazards, which were outlined earlier. And like flood management areas, of course, can extend right throughout the city. A buyer from a property, whether it's on the coastal area or on the west side of the city, has to know information about potential hazards. They're entitled to do that, and I believe that as a council we'd be failing in our duty if we weren't to support these recommendations. And I thoroughly support the further work being done, and thank the staff for that, and particularly the inclusion of this the coastal communities and also wider communities across Christchurch.
Paul?
Look, I first of all just want to thank the community for driving this to where we got it today. And I remember meeting with Warwick, was it mid last year or mid this year? It was at some point not long after we accepted the Tonkin Taylor report, and the issues he raised where we had made mistakes. We know that now. We've made mistakes as a council, and it was due to the fast track process. So we recognise that, and we're starting to address them. I'm pleased to see there will be another group set up to actually oversee some of this work and the continued involvement to the wider community. And we have to remember it's just not New Brighton that gets affected here. It's right around the coast, comes right up to close to Central City. So it's a large area, 18,000 households. And so we've got to make sure whatever we do here going forward is right and isn't subject to criticism due to inaccuracies. So I'm supportive of getting more information. I'm supportive of actually working through the issues with our community, but I am actually really disappointed we have to do this as a city on our own, in isolation from the rest of the country, when we're a small island and we are all facing these issues right across the country. So that's a disappointment. And if you look at a number of issues we've had to deal with, alcohol policy, shopping on Easter, freedom camping, these are all major issues for this, for our city. So, I will support this today, and I know David's not going to support it, but I think we do need to get him. We do need to get him behind it, but we need to make sure we bring the community along with us, and I think that's really, really important. And again, thanks to the council for actually taking the time, pulling it out, and reviewing it, and getting to this point today. It's important.
Thank you. I just want to conclude the debate with a comment, which is that this process began when we were under the pressure of doing every single chapter in our district plan in a truncated time frame. The natural hazards chapter, we had sufficient time to go out and engage with communities over the issues around natural hazards for the flood management areas. And we actually had really good public engagement with presentations run over a full day where people could come in the morning or the afternoon, and they were excellent. We had speakers from externally, we had speakers from within the council, and it really helped people understand why we were putting in a flood management area as we were, and it was replacing a pre-existing one. That worked. This coastal hazards one, it didn't, because there was no time for the report to be developed. And I think, in a way, Tonkin and Taylor's been on the receiving end of criticism that isn't deserved. Tonkin Taylor has an exceptional record in terms of understanding the nature of these environments, and has studied our coastal environment, and in fact knows more about our land than I think our land is the most studied land in the entire world. I mean, in terms of liquefaction, lateral spread, and the other risks that it does face. These are all natural hazard. Mass movement as well. I mean, they're involved in that work as well. So we know more about our land, but, and this is a quote from their latest report to the Ministry for the Environment, community or stakeholder engagement is critical to best practice natural hazard management. Good stakeholder involvement leads to a shared and better understanding of the risks faced and the range of treatment options. The process of engagement should be iterative. It should be early. It should be active, and it should be time-rich. We take our time. Communication and consultation are a necessary part of each step of the risk management process. That's what's not been done here. And it is this report that recommends that that government issue guidance or change the law so that there can be a safe harbour where information can be gathered in order to develop that communication around the risk and have that really deep and time-rich conversation with communities. So to those that made the deputation earlier on, this isn't over. This isn't at all over, and I think that you can take some comfort from the fact that this will be reviewed as information comes to light. It does enable us to move on to the next stage, but again, highlighting to central government that they actually have to step into this space and recognise that our coastline is shared across New Zealand, and it is something that requires national guidance and support. So on that, I'll put the first motion, which is item number 6. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Sorry?
Can you just record my vote against 2?
Oh yes, sorry. So record Yanni's vote against 2 and record David East's vote against the lot. That was all right? Yep. So that's carried. Thank you. And then the item number 7, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. The next item is the submission from Christchurch City Council on better urban planning. Would someone like to move that? I mean, the amendments have been made. We wanted to have it signed off by council. Someone like to move it? Pauline, seconded by Phil. Yanni, we moved it to here so that we could simply resolve to pass it as a council before the election.
I think staff have covered it quite well.
Change to this. Staff might speak to me.
Okay, what? Yep.
I just thought that given the concerns that we expressed, that we should also pass a resolution to ask that we request government to return district planning powers to us as a city.
That's
This report is to the Productivity Commission.
yeah. This is a submission from the Christchurch City Council on a draft report prepared by the New Zealand Productivity Commission. It's not an order to. That's not an amendment to this resolution. It's not an order. No, it's just not appropriate at this stage. I mean, it's just... Sorry, staff have just made one amendment to page 60. Just referring, the council considers that the Christchurch Replacement District Plan, along with the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement and the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Strategy, prioritise responses to these within a broader context that balances social, economic, environmental and cultural outcomes for the city.
Yes, yeah, and just explaining that, it was pointed out to me yesterday that just for consistency with the submission from the UDS partners, so it's really just aligning that.
All right, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. The next item. Sorry? Well, we haven't got much time left. No, I think we're just going to carry on. People need to absent themselves to refresh themselves, they can. The next item is
Annual report.
the annual report.
We now have an independent auditor's report.
Right. So we've got a recommendation from the Audit and Risk Management Committee, so I'll move that, seconded by Jamie. Are there any questions? Yanni?
So this is questions on annual report?
Yes.
Okay, got a few questions. Just the whole issue with skirt and the way in which the funding.
I just think it'd be really good for us to get a bit of a explanation around that, because I don't understand why
Sorry, the annual report is not an opportunity to ask questions about the issues that get reported to individual committees or to the council through other means. This is about the technical aspects of the report and the purposes of the report itself.
Sorry, so you don't want any questions on the auditor report?
You can talk.
Right. Matters that lead to a qualified opinion. Valuation of roading network and stormwater system. So I was just trying to understand, given how much assessment SCIRT has done around our infrastructure to come up with the infrastructure repair program, why we're still in such a state of understanding the valuation of our roading assets.
I can answer that. It's not the work that SCIRT have done or not done that's causing the problem, it's the assessment by our own asset owners. And the the wastewater and water were the first two that were addressed, and both of those have been valued and the valuations have been approved by audit. Stormwater is the very last, and that's being looked at this year. And roading, which is the one in the middle, we're having an issue around, we've assessed the condition of it. The problem we're having is trying to relate the condition to the period in which it should be repaired, because that's not the normal methodology for assessing the age and condition of roads.
So what does that mean for us, in terms of the possible valuation?
Well, we've got a valuation, we just haven't been able to get it to a point that audit can accept it. So it means there's a lot more work to be done this year, because without getting roading valuation approved, that we won't be in a position of being able to get a clean audit opinion. And we did quite a lot of work last year. We got it to a reasonable point when we met with the expert from Wellington, from the audit office. He was not uncomfortable with where we'd got to, but it was that last 5% that needed to be connected, and we were unable to get to that point in the time available, and we had the added complication that the staff member who could have assisted us most was off sick on extended leave, so that sort of brought it to a halt.
Okay, so the likely outcome possibly is that our roads are not as valuable as we think they are because of the repairs that are being done? Or?
No, we know the condition of them. Right. Normally roading, when roading's valued, you normally look at the age of the road and you go, if it's this old it'll be replaced here, and if it's this old it'll be replaced here, subject to its condition. We are trying to value them on a different basis. We're looking at the condition of them and going, this bad means you need to replace it in 5 years, and this bad means it can wait 10 years. It's trying to connect those two, because nobody else values their roads that way, because no one else needs to.
Okay. And then just the other question I had was around the whole SCIRT, the work in progress balance of 54 million.
Yes.
What's going on with that?
The issue is it's a difference of opinion between ourselves and the audit office as to the treatment of it. We have treated it, we believe it's part of the capital work, and SCIRT treat it that way as well, so they sweep the cost up and capitalise it as part of the completed projects. The OAG has the understanding that it should be treated as an expense, so we've had a lot of debate on it, and we have, in the end, agreed to disagree.
Right.
But again, can I just say to you, because Skirt's work will be finished this year, we expect a lot of those problems to have gone away for this time. When we're considering the 2017 accounts, we don't expect to be looking at these same issues.
Okay, and one question on the reporting itself, just in terms of the remuneration bands. I know the 2015 bands are different than the 2016 bands, particularly around remuneration of council employees. And I just thought, I had two questions on that. One is, why are they different? And two, have we done any work, or are we considering reporting on pay relativity across the organisation?
Across the organisation?
I'll answer the question on the bands. The bands are set down by legislation, so we have to go in $20,000 bands up from 60. If you have fewer than 6 people in a band, you can combine them, hence why you don't necessarily get the same bands year on year, and that's why you can't do it that way, and that's to protect privacy. It's one of those reasons for doing that. You can have less than 6 in your top band, but you must have at least 6 in every band going up. So hence why, as you see, as you get to the higher bands, we have in the second top band there's 6, and the bands get wider than 20,000 in order to get that 6.
And the second question about relativity is a difficult question to answer. You have to be more specific about relative to what, sorry?
Just around looking at the relativity of who's paid what, so rather than just bands, but looking at the multipliers from the lowest paid to the top highest paid.
Sorry, I'm not even sure if that helps really. Relativity as a general sense is usually looked at with regard to that level of work against a different entity. So that's something that could possibly be looked at, but I don't think that's what you're asking. You're asking for the difference between the top and the bottom. Yeah, all that information would be available within the report if anyone wanted to calculate it, although I would question the validity of that type of approach.
Any other questions? So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Someone like to move the Audit and Risk Management Committee minutes? Jimmy Chen, seconded Jamie Goff. Put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And the resolution to exclude the public for the balance of the meeting, with Rob Hall and Steve Clark of Development Christchurch Limited remaining after the public have been excluded.
And I think Paul Munro as well.
Oh,
He's here, so
and Paul Munro from CCHL.
I think he's here for the appointment of directors.
For the appointment of directors paper 11,
And
item 11.
And for item 11, Vicky.
Oh yeah, and Vicky and Yanni need to step back from item 11. No, they were on the appointments committee, you weren't. Anyway, but we can have that discussion afterwards, but I just have to acknowledge a conflict. Yeah. I mean, if you want to, you can.
I stepped back from it last time, so just for consistency, I thought I would.
Whatever. It's up to you. Anyway, so I will... that's moved. Who seconded it? Jamie? I'll put that motion.
Sorry, can I just have my vote recorded against 18 and 19 going into PX, which is the letter of expectations for CHL and the Regenerate Christchurch Statement of Intent, and simply because I think we should be doing these things in public.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. And please record Yanni's objection to the 2 items on the agenda. So that's carried. We'll move into PX, and perhaps if people could be back here in 5 minutes.